News and Views, Black Perspective, WSYR-TV presents a weekly series of programs devoted to the interests and concerns of the citizens of our community. Now, here is your host, Dennis Dowdell.
Good morning. Welcome to News and Views, Black Perspective. As most of you know, we try our very best on News and Views, Black Perspective to keep you up to date on some of the issues that are occurring here and being addressed to in Syracuse and Onondaga County. And one of those issues is the matter of integration and desegregation of our schools. And so we have invited back to our program our Superintendent of Schools, Sidney Johnson, Superintendent of the Syracuse School District, to talk with us about some of the recent kinds of activities that have been going on so that you might be brought up to date on what's happening presently at the Board of Education. Dr. Johnson?
Thank you.
To our program. One of the questions that I'd like to ask you is, why is the Board of Education retreating from its mandatory integration plan, which you submitted to the State Commission of Education back last June?
Well, I don't believe it's a retreat. I think you warranted in using the word. If you feel it's appropriate, to me, it's not a positive term, and I would rather deal in positive terms. It seems to me that the board agreed to listen to some parents and others in the community about what's best for school children here, and that's what has happened. That there is a feeling that all of the things that were in the first plan were not workable, and that we've only seen a small sample thus far, and that some of the other things that have happened make it a healthier situation for us to pursue an alternate, and that's what's under consideration now.
You know, I know that you've been going around and listening every night, and you've been, for the last, couple of months, I guess, maybe 3, talking with parents and talking with PTOs and all kinds of groups about the situation here and getting their ideas. And I'm wondering if you might want to share with us what have been some of the viewpoints of some of the inner city parents with respect to this particular program, particularly the mandatory program.
Specifically in the King, Danforth, and Merrick School neighborhoods, as well as at Sumner School, there were several outward expressions that they felt like that there was no necessity to bus, that their youngsters should be educated right there in the neighborhood school, that they should have a neighborhood school for the preservation of their neighborhood, and that the performance of the youngsters ought to be brought into line with quality and performance up to grade level right there, and that there was no necessity to ship them out, and I heard the term truck them out and bus them out, and things got rather warm at times, Dennis.
I know that you've had some very rough meetings, and there's a lot of emotion attached to this. It's a very crucial and important subject, and that's one reason why I asked you to come back, so we can keep the lines clear on just exactly where we're heading. Now, you have proposed an open enrollment policy that would, I guess, bring about, you hope would bring about the integration of schools, perhaps to the extent that a mandatory plan would bring. And your plan has been called racist by one of the school board members, you know, where you talk about parents of minority pupils in a racially imbalanced school being guaranteed the opportunity to transfer their children to one of 3 selected schools they have chosen and have transportation provided. And I took that quote from the article in the December 16th, it was either the Post-Standard or the Herald Journal. And I'm just wondering what your comments are on that particular program. And the second question that I would have with that is, how will this effectuate the 3 schools that you just got through talking about, Merrick, King, Danforth, and some of the other inner city schools? How would it effectuate the desegregation of some of those schools if they follow your open enrollment plan?
Well, I think that summary statement would be a consensus statement of the parents of the youngsters who came out to those meetings, and follow-up work that was done by the 3 principals in each of their individual schools, that this was the predominant answer that they received from the parents about what was acceptable to them for their children. It came through loud and clear that they wanted a choice, and that if they wanted to leave, they would accept that choice, that they did not agree with the pairings that had been done in the pro forma mandatory plan. And certainly being allowed a choice and being guaranteed that they could have transportation if they wanted it, they felt that this would not be an imposition on them, that they could make this free choice themselves.
You know, there are many people, and I know you recognize this, there are many people who say that the burden, and I think someone said that at the last board meeting that you had, that the burden of integrating the schools, it seems, is being placed upon just the black children. And I believe Connie Timberlake indicated this in her statement at the board meeting that you had when you first introduced this. And there are many people who believe in integration who say that the burden ought to be on both white and black children, and I'm wondering how you would respond to that.
Well, I think that there are many parents, including myself, who believe that in the history of these community upsets about school desegregation, that the burden has been on the black youngster as the scapegoat for all of the unruliness and lawlessness that has taken place. On the other hand, I think we can point with pride to those black youngsters who have gone into previously segregated white schools and done well and performed well and been accepted well based upon performance. Certainly, I am with every youngster and their families who wish to go, and certainly as long as I serve, I'll go with them if necessary to see to it that they are not only treated with dignity, but that they have every opportunity to learn, and they'll be served in a climate in which they can learn. Now, as far as the burden is concerned, there is nothing to say that that an optional plan will be allowed either black or white families, but that is not to say that an expression of what the parents would like should not be heard.
And shouldn't be reckoned with in terms of as you develop your particular plans.
Well, I would think that's a natural fall. On the other hand, we have an economic situation in which we have too many school buildings. We have more school buildings serving 5,000 less children, more square footage now than we had 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. The combinations of schools brings about racial balance and desegregation in every one of the options that we've enumerated that there's a possibility of.
There were, I think one of the concerns is, and you and I have been in some discussions with a group of folk, there are some concerns about your own personal commitment in terms of integration and desegregation. And I wanted you back on the program because I felt that you accepted the position as superintendent of schools, and you're our leader along with the board, and you're going to express your opinions. And I just wanted cleared from our program here just how you feel about your commitment. There are those who are skeptical about your commitment. I'm wondering whether or not you want to comment on that.
Well, sure. The process of desegregation, integration of school children has as a goal to have equal educational opportunity for each one of the young people. And my position would be, judge me on the final product. If I'm going to be allowed to serve to the point that you can expect some outcome from this, judge me on the final product. Don't necessarily judge me on something that was already down on a piece of paper that had not been activated. And because I take exception to that, I think that my performance could be better carried in a different kind of vehicle, and if I arrived at as good a product or better product, then that's the way I wish to be judged. If my product or my vehicle proves to be faulty, then I'll have to be judged on the basis of that.
You know, one of the other questions that has come up, Sid, has been the question of of this. Do you really believe, and of course you've proposed it, but I'll still ask it, do you really believe that a voluntary program of integration is really going to work? And if so, are there any communities that you can point to where a voluntary integration program has worked throughout the country?
Well, I don't think that we can point to a voluntary program or a mandatory program that has really worked. The fallout from mandatory programs that have caused much in the way of community problems are probably reportable in great numbers. We only know about some of the calm that takes place after you've sorted out everything, but there's no accounting for how many people are damaged, how many are permanently out of school, never with the opportunity to perform in that school district again, where there has been flight from the schools. I just read over the past few days that the black minority in Boston in the public school enrollment figures now is nearing 50%. And it's accounted for to the extent that the white families have either left the school district or they're in private schools. So, you know, the Boston situation, after it's all calmed down, would have the possible same effect here. You can be busing black youngsters into schools mandatorily and have them end up as black schools after they've been bused. And, you know, what have you accomplished?
One of the things that people bring up, though, is this matter of the Supreme Court decision and the law. I mean, as to whether or not the emphasis ought to be put on what the law of the land is, and how do you feel about that in terms of compliance with that law of 1954, and how does the majority of the board members feel about that?
Well, I believe that the intent of the law is to see to it that the youngsters have equal opportunity to achieve and to succeed. My interpretation of that means that how we get to that point, that we can show a average and better performance by these youngsters is a quality program, and that there's nothing in the law that says that you've got to have 7 white and 3 blacks to bring about the point of equilibrium that this best takes place. I still think you've got to listen to mothers and fathers.
You know, I've heard this too, giving you a kind of a report of what's reverberating in the community. There are some people who said that, well, perhaps maybe the board wants this to go to court. And if it goes to court and maybe on up to perhaps the Supreme Court, they might rule in favor of a mandatory program, and then that would get the board off the hook and say, then they can come back and say to the community, well, look, we have to do this because here's what the Supreme Court or the appellate court says about integration and desegregation, so we've got to do it. Whether you like it or not, here it is. And then you have to go through with your expensive program of busing or what have you. Has there been any discussion with board members in terms of what might happen if somebody decides they want to take it to federal court?
There's been no discussion with me or the board about the ramifications of a court suit. I do believe that that's an issue that the board should not shy away from. If there are principles to be carried out on the basis of a lawsuit, you know, that has to be faced too. I think that it's not going to be any less expensive to test it in court. Yeah. In the meanwhile, if we're proceeding to do something, our count now is that we are still racially imbalanced in 8 schools, so that means more than 50% of what was a task to be accomplished at this time last year has now been accomplished. Now, it's true we're getting down to the really harder ones, and, you know, there may not be an answer, the ones that we've talked about.
Yes,
there may not, as I said, there may not be an answer in mandatorily busing them if it turns out that where you bus them, that they end up being bused to a school that's just as black as the one they're being bused from.
And these are some of the problems that you're trying to weigh in coming up with the plans that you're coming up with.
We don't want to frustrate the youngsters. We do not want the parents deeply upset and unhappy to the point that they're no longer willing to contribute. their adult maturity to the solution of a community problem.
You were talking about school consolidation before you came up with the open enrollment plan, and one of the things I've wondered about, and I think a number of people are wondering about, is what's happened to the school consolidation? Has that been thrown out the window? Are you still going through with that? And will that bring about some of the integration and desegregation that we're talking about?
Every consolidation carries with it a commitment to bring into the new structure or the new organization of schools a balanced school, or a commitment to balance. I think it worries some people that some of the so-called inner city or black schools might not be included in the consolidation. That's not necessarily true. In the long run, I think we'll do what the parents will accept as the best formation of school buildings. I would like to see these consolidations. We have to have some additional input from engineers and architects about the kinds of things that it would take. There cannot be instantaneous transformation of these school buildings without some expertise that is other than just pure paperwork. The Salt Springs possibility, a combination of schools in that neighborhood, the Ed Smith-Sumner combination is a good one. There still has to be some real consideration of what the parents at Danforth School, they want a coalition with the Southside schools. The King parents have not expressed, what they want. The Merrick parents have given some indication that they're interested in the Bellevue-Roberts grouping. And I think that all of these things are possible if they are pulled together with that as a motive that is out in front of the public and everybody knows what's taking place.
Yeah. We talked about this on the program before, Sid, and you being a superintendent of schools, you came and you accepted a very, I call it an awesome responsibility, a very difficult responsibility, and it's difficult all over the country. And you have to work with forces that are for busing as a tool of integration. You also have to work with forces that don't want any busing, and they don't want any integration either. And you're the superintendent of all the people of the Syracuse School District. And you must have formed within your mind, in terms of your own beliefs of equal opportunity and education and all that a democracy such as ours can offer, some kind of philosophical viewpoint that you work by. And I'm just wondering, what is that philosophical viewpoint that makes you come up with the kind of decisions that you're coming up with as our leader here in the field of education in Syracuse and Onondaga County?
Well, Dennis, I really believe that it's easy to say things that will solve a problem, to make preliminary statements as to the solution. I think that you can only be judged, though, on whether or not you actually solve the problem. You can be judged on the output. You can be judged upon the satisfaction that the parents have with the school programs that their youngsters are in, and the teachers that they have, what the school-home relationship, all of these things go to make up the final product. Now, I'm committed to hoping for a successful, acceptable product, one in which the youngsters have had equal opportunity, and that it shows a much higher success rate and a much higher achievement record as far as our young kids are concerned.
In other words, are you saying that you want that product to be a student who is able to become self-sufficient when he finishes the 12th grade, either pursue his education or go to work and be able to get a job in one of our businesses or business and industry here in this community without any encumbrance?
That's exactly the outcome that we should be looking for. we likewise should be putting just as much emphasis on programs at the early childhood level that guarantees youngster and young parents that there will be quality so that they attain the learning skills and that they get this in a climate of learning that allows them to continue to be ambitious and to enjoy school as a part of their child life.
And would you include within that, Sid, to get that experience with children of all racial and ethnic groups?
Why, sure. There is no other way that you can fully participate in the community until you can cope with the mixing of the races or the elbow-to-elbow groupings that are going to take place in all of the industries and all of the endeavors of adulthood.
That's one of the things I know that I'm concerned with, and I know a lot of people are concerned with, is that you and I have come here, and we know that we have been in situations, integrated into racial situations, whereby there are a lot of people who cannot handle certain kinds of situations because they haven't had the kind of experience, they haven't rubbed elbows with people of other racial and minority groups, ethnic groups, and it becomes difficult for them. In many instances, they have to have a specialist, you know, to work on a special problem, a black assistant. Maybe they have to have a Puerto Rican assistant to handle the Puerto Rican problems. And they're really not Puerto Rican or black problems, they're our problems. And that's the thing that I'm concerned about, and I think you know how I feel about it, that children ought to have that experience. And that's the reason why I asked you the question about whether or not your open enrollment, did you think your open enrollment plan with under voluntarism is really going to give the kids that experience? So when they come out and they get the job in the plant, in the factory, and they become supervisors, they don't have to ask anybody how to handle that youngster that's of another racial or ethnic group.
I think that the opportunity will be there for each family to see that their youngster has this kind of experience. I think that, no question about it, over the long run, I have complete confidence that the minority families will take advantage of this. Now, I still think that they have a good point in wanting to preserve their community. And I think that given the opportunity, they'll work with other races to do something that is advantageous for their family as well as advantageous for other families. And, you know, maybe we haven't played all of our trumps yet.
You think the white families will be willing to crisscross and volunteer their children into some of the, will the other schools be attracted? I know in your consolidation plan you were talking about some magnet schools, and will those other schools be attractive enough to attract them there so that we get the kind of result that you desire?
Sure. We know that there have been attractive programs before that drew white families into black schools. The generalization you get now is it won't work. The white families won't go. We haven't asked them to come. We haven't given them something to come for. The family has to see something in it for them. And if the community wants to prove that it can rise to the occasion of making this an acceptable and a preferred place of education for young children, you know, we still have to work toward attempting to have this be a life situation.
It's a very difficult situation, and I think if I follow you, before when they talked about, before you came, they were talking about the volunteer, people were supposed to call in down to Evis Cranford's office, and I think in terms of volunteering for integration, it was not successful. Will the Board of Education now, will the board support you and give you all the kinds of supportive kinds of things that are going to be needed to sell this program to the people, both white and black, of the community, and specifically whites?
Well, I think the board is obligated, if they undertake it, to be supportive of it. There are going to be some tight situations fiscally. This is less of a burden than the mandatory plan, and if we can take resources that had been or would be required for strictly transportation in the mandatory plan and put it into additional educational service and instruction for youngsters, then I think we've spent the money much more advantageously for these young people.
All right, now we've got just about 3.5 or 4 minutes, and I want to ask you this question. Now, getting ready, what about whether it would be mandatory or voluntary? There has to be some preparation for some of the changes. You know, if it's going to be successful, there has to be some preparation of teachers and administrators. You know, in this program you were talking about a minute ago, some of the complaints that some of the parents had when you had it before, of not being welcome at the school. What kind of programs do you have, or are you going to set up now to prepare teachers, administrators, and parents for this open enrollment program that you're talking about?
A part of the resolution requires that the superintendent guarantee a healthy learning climate. To me, that's the composite of the things that you ask about. It's our responsibility to confront all of the adults that are going to be involved in this, the principals, the teachers, the ancillary persons. They all have to work to make sure that if this is good for the vitality of the school district, that they all have to make sure that they perform as professional adults. The attention to behavior, adult behavior, that has been construed as racist in the past is just going to be intolerable. And I don't think that the parents, black or white, will accept it. And I think that they will be outspoken about it if it does surface in any of our schools. And we're not going to sit back and wait to see if things like this blow over. I think we're going to be right in the middle of it.
You'll be right in the middle, and you as you say, you've got some plans to prepare the people for the kinds of changes that you know are going to come about. You know, one last question I'd like to add. We don't have very much time, just about a minute, but what do you see? Hopefully we can resolve this thing soon, because it must be having some kind of psychological effect on children listening to parents talking about all of the discussion about whether or not black and white youngsters are going to go to school together, to learn together, to respect each other together. What do you see?
I think that already that the youngsters from kindergarten on up have seen some of the other race, and they know that their behaviors are not, especially among the youngsters, are not to be afraid of. And I think that regardless of what the adults may be frustrated over, I think the young people are much more ready.
And I think that that's perhaps is a good note for us to end on, and I certainly want to express my appreciation to you for coming back and answering some hardline questions. This is our way of trying to help, and certainly we hope that the community has a much better understanding of where Superintendent Johnson stands on integration and desegregation and trying to get a good plan for the city of Syracuse. Thank you for being with us on News and Views Black Perspective.
Join us again next week for News and Views Black Perspective with Dennis Dowdell. This has been a WSYR-TV Public Affairs presentation.